Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Wild, Wild Death, the show where we talk about all the ways people in the Old West went to that big old party in the sky. Each week, we spin the wagon wheel of untimely demise, and whatever manner of death it lands on, we tell you a story about it. My name is Jack James Busa.
And I'm Susan Busa Leshner.
Hey.
Hey.
And Leslie will not be joining us today, so it's just me and my mom.
Yeah, Leslie has to be away.
But the good news on that is I finally get my hands on the wagon wheel of untimely demise.
Well, I think what we should do is spin it.
Okay. Whew. Okay. Moment of truth. Here I go.
Or what will it land on? Let's see.
Okay. Looks like the manner of death is miscalculation.
Oh, that seems to be a running theme in general in the Old West.
Yeah.
But I have a story about one miscalculation.
Here we go.
Gold. When we think of a gold rush in the American West, it brings up images of men scrambling into town, all looking for a way to strike it rich overnight by panning for gold in a creek or digging in a dark mine. But there were a lot of other ways to rake in gold in a gold rush town. This is the story of a savvy businesswoman who saw an opportunity, not in a mine, but in a bedroom. A lot of bedroom. And she made the most of it right until the very end. This story is called The Pearl of Cripple Creek.
Right until the end. All right, let's hear about this Pearl of Cripple Creek.
Pearl was born sometime around 1862 and raised outside of Chicago in the town of Evansville, Indiana. Now, Pearl was not her real name. I'm not sure what it is, but it might have been Eliza. Not a lot is known about her early life, but she did have 4 siblings, 3 brothers, and a sister. Her parents were evidently respectable, law-abiding citizens, and it seems like as a child, Pearl, or Eliza, lived a fairly well-to-do life. Now, for some reason, at age 15, Pearl left her family and moved to Denver. Now, there's a lot of stories about she got married, but it's also possible that she got pregnant, and that's why she moved to Denver, where she went by the name Mrs. Eliza Martin and sometimes Mrs. Isabel Martin or just Mrs. Martin, possibly posing as a young widow. Now, if you got pregnant out of wedlock, you could move to a different town and say, I'm a widow. That way you didn't look like an unwed mother. But I personally could not find any record of a baby, so this may or may not be true. And if it is, maybe the child didn't survive or she gave the baby up. I don't know.
Mysterious past. She ends up with Denver. She has 18 names. Okay.
But when she got there, she wrote her sister that she had found work as a milliner, like a hat maker. So making ladies' hats was one of the few respectable jobs for a young middle-class lady. And that probably made her sister feel better about Pearl's move to Denver. However, the truth was, Pearl was not working at a hat shop. She was working as a prostitute.
Hell yeah, Pearl.
You know, there weren't a lot of jobs for women, and they didn't pay very well. Genteel poverty was evidently not the thing for Pearl. Denver was a good place to be if you were a young, pretty prostitute. Mine owners there were making money, and they were looking for a place to spend it when it was time to have fun. And evidently, Pearl was raking it in. But more than that, Pearl was definitely learning how the oldest profession worked as a business.
Hey.
So for a while, things were going well in Denver, but then there was one of these recession panic things, and the price of silver dropped from 83 cents an ounce to 62 cents an ounce, which is a lot back then. And profits were down, miners' wages were cut, and it was time for Pearl to find a new place to ply her trade.
Honey, ply her trade or plow her trade? Ho ho!
Fortunately,
Sorry.
Fortunately, gold had been discovered in an area called Cripple Creek, near the base of Pikes Peak and about 20 miles southwest of Colorado Springs. Now, gold attracted prospectors and entrepreneurs, dreamers and doers, all looking for a lucky break, which is usually meant was there was nobody in the town and overnight there was the town.
Okay.
So for Pearl, a booming gold town meant just two things, men and money. So in 1893, she packed her things and headed to Cripple Creek, Colorado, evidently still telling her family, I'm going there to make hats. I mean, look, Mom, she's moved from Denver to the booming gold rush town of Cripple Creek to make hats.
There's such a need for hats.
For women's hats.
Did they come to visit her and...
I don't think they did. Anyway, when she got to Cripple Creek, because she saved her money, she had a bit of money, and she was going to do things differently than she had in Denver. Because Pearl was a savvy businesswoman who could see a good opportunity. At this time, she was still going by the name Mrs. Martin, but when she got to Cripple Creek, she changed it to Pearl Devere. She dyed her hair red.
Wow.
And then she went to the red light district and purchased a small wood frame house at 353 Myers Avenue. But Pearl wasn't going to be another working girl in the house. This time, she was going to run things. Pearl Devere was now the madam of her own bordello.
Wow, I like Pearl. Pearl Devere.
These women that ran these bawdy houses, I guess, had some power. They were making money. They were one of the few things where they could run their own business and they could take care of things and pile up money. So, this is a smart move if you're a woman on your own.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you have to be really smart in that particular line of work because obviously it comes with its own dangers. So I like that she made her own agency.
Yes. Women really couldn't own a lot of things and they couldn't vote, so this was a good opportunity in the West in a boom town. So she made the most of it. And from the start, her place was classier than any other establishment on Myers Avenue. She had the prettiest girls and the wealthiest clientele. And Pearl herself fell in love with a man named C.B. Flynn, and she invested in a small gold mill that he was starting up. He wasn't mining, he was, I think, extracting the ore. Pearl had her successful business, and Flynn had his. Things were going great.
Did Flynn know about her?
Yes, he knew. He was fine with it.
Wow, they're so modern.
Yeah, and she gave him money to start up his gold mill, so things were doing okay.
Okay, this story, everything's going well.
However, remember that I said she bought a small wood frame house?
Yeah.
In 1896, unfortunately, there was a devastating fire in Cripple Creek that burned down most of the town, including Pearl Devere's house on Myers Avenue and Flynn's gold mill. Everything was gone.
Uh-oh.
All gone. So Flynn did what he had to do, and he moved to Monterrey, Mexico to work in a smelting facility. And Pearl was like, not going to do that. She wasn't ready to give up on Cripple Creek or her business. But first, she went to Europe on a little educational fact-finding and shopping trip.
Cue the montage. Yeah. She's having this pastry, that pastry. She's buying hats, sending a photograph back to her sister. Look.
But she's in there tasting wines, going, this one or that one. Anyway, when she came back, Pearl built a brand new house at the same location. And this time, it was made out of brick.
Hell yeah.
Inside, it was fitted with the finest of everything: velvet wallpaper, electric crystal chandeliers, hand-woven rugs, 2 indoor bathrooms complete with bathtubs and running water. She had fine furniture shipped in from Europe. There were private bedrooms for each girl where they could entertain their gentlemen guests. The place was stocked with the best liquor, champagne, and wines, and served the most delicious food. She even installed an early version of the telephone and had an intercom system.
Wow.
The staff included housekeepers, cooks, butlers, and musicians. Pearl's new place was modern, upscale, and elegant,
Just like Pearl.
but it was welcoming, so Pearl called her establishment the Old Homestead, which I think
Hey,
is kind of like a little joke. It seems a little winky wink to me. I like that.
she's good for that. The old homestead on Cripple Creek.
But the featured attraction, of course, were the girls. Pearl hired the most beautiful girls to work there. I think she had like 4. And they had to be up on etiquette, be stylish, refined, and sophisticated. And Pearl paid them very well. She took care of them too. She provided monthly checkups by a doctor to make sure everyone stayed healthy. Nevertheless, modern healthcare then was still fairly hit or miss.
Yeah.
Weirdly, drugs like cocaine for a pick-me-up, arsenic as a skin whitener, or morphine as a painkiller and sleep aid were available to buy over the counter at the local pharmacy.
It's good for you.
And there still wasn't a cure for sexually transmitted diseases, so that's why the doctor came in every month for these checkups. The other way she kept her girls safe was by putting very strict regulations on the clientele who came in the door. Male guests who wanted to enjoy an evening at the Old Homestead first had to apply to enter. They had to provide references attesting to their good character, pass a background check, and pay a $150 cover charge. And this is just to get in the door. Food was extra, liquor was extra, and if you wanted to spend the night with a lady, that was another $250. Adjusting for inflation, $250 is over $10,000 today.
The letters of recommendation, like, yeah, Bob, he's a really good lay.
That's not the recommendation. It was from another guy. I know Bob from the bank.
Guess you'd have to like hit up your friends who are already in it, because I don't know. Here's a letter from my employer.
It's like, the old boys club. I know
Yeah, I
him
got
because
it.
I'm a mine owner or something like that. But I mean, this is, I think, a good marketing because
Yeah,
it's super exclusive,
yeah,
and it appeals to people that suddenly have a lot of money or have always had a lot of money and their ego.
yeah, totally. Their ego, because also something that can be seen as seedy now is sort of luxurious and modern and nice. And you are permitted to come in here. These are the best. So Pearl is pretty smart.
When they got there, the men were definitely catered to. So if a man wasn't sure which woman he wanted to spend time with for the night, he could go up to this viewing room where he could privately look through the window and watch the women pose, then pose again undressed before he made his choice.
If I was one of the girls,
Yeah.
I feel like I'd be picked the most. But that's just me.
Uh-huh. Anyway, anywho, business was good. There was a lot of gold. People had money. And the fact is, prostitution was good for the town, too, because it was legal in Cripple Creek, which means it was taxed.
Oh.
If you think of people just pouring into town and setting up tents everywhere, those people are not going to pay property tax.
Yeah.
How does the city government run? They're going to charge the saloon. They're going to charge people that are actually there making money in the town. Prostitutes had to pay $6 a month, and madams like Pearl had to pay $16 a month. They were definitely funding the city government. But with the door prices Pearl was charging, this wasn't a problem. Pearl not only paid her taxes, she also donated heavily to churches. And she did things like, and I know this sounds cliche, but she did do these things. She helped out poor widows, and she did a lot of good deeds in the town. She built up a lot of goodwill. However, working girls were still second-class citizens, and this horrified the few proper women of Cripple Creek who did not want to mingle with them. So prostitutes were only allowed to shop at sort of off hours in the morning or off hours of the day so they didn't accidentally rub shoulders with these proper women at the dress shop or the market. But Pearl, she didn't care. Every day, she got dressed up and drove down the main streets of Cripple Creek in an open carriage led by a beautiful team of black horses. She dressed in the height of fashion, and she was never seen in public in the same outfit twice.
Oh, she's too cool.
So money was coming in. House was doing well, had just been built. On top of that, she had a new lover who wanted her to throw the most extravagant party Cripple Creek had ever seen. Now, let me just tell you right up front, I don't know who this new lover is. I have not been able to find out anywhere what his name was. I've had one thing I read that has one speculation that it might be this guy named William Stratton, but that is, nobody knows for sure, so I don't know who this person is. Anyway, the party was set for June 4th, 1897. Pearl's lover sent her a spectacular $800 pearl-encrusted pink silk gown imported from Paris to wear. So if $250 was equivalent to close to $10,000, this was a very expensive gown.
This is a fabulous gown.
So she had the dress and the best wine, best champagne, the best caviar were ordered, the finest musician plays, and flowers were brought in from Mexico to decorate the house.
Wow.
It's on.
Get on your blush diamond-encrusted gown and let's get lit.
However, during the party,
No.
Pearl and her lover had an argument.
No.
The lover immediately took the train back to Denver. See ya. But Pearl, who was really a tough cookie, insisted the party go on, so it did. Finally, Pearl said she was tired and headed off to bed. But after a hectic day, the argument, the energy of the party, Pearl found it difficult to get to sleep. So she used the common sleep aid that she had gotten from the pharmacy, morphine.
Uh-oh.
And unfortunately, she miscalculated, took too much, and the next morning, on June the 5th, she died of a morphine overdose.
Pearl.
There is some to say that she died of suicide, but there is absolutely no evidence to support that at all.
I think she probably had some drinks at the party, took a regular dose that she would normally take of this morphine, but these things mixed together.
Maybe. It wasn't like, take these many drops. It was just, here's the bottle with the dropper, put it in some water and drink it, right? So it's not like it's regularized.
So what happened?
When it came time to bury Pearl, it was discovered that she did not really have any money.
What?
She still owed for the construction, decoration, and expenses of the new house. Remember, it had only been barely open a year.
Oh.
So things were going well, and if Pearl could have operated a few years more, she definitely would have been able to stockpile a profit. But at the time of her death, there wasn't enough time for her to do that, and so there wasn't enough money for the funeral.
Wow.
In addition, her sister learned that Pearl had died, and so she came into town to help settle her estate. And then she found out that Pearl wasn't a hat maker, but a madam of a bordello.
She learned a lot of things about Pearl on that trip.
She just showed up at the house and went, "What is this viewing room?" She immediately disowned her sister and left town in a judgmental huff. And there was still no money for the funeral. All of the girls in the house and the people who she'd helped over the years were devastated because Pearl really did deserve a proper send-off.
Yeah, she's like a pillar. She's a pillar of the community, it sounds like.
A secret pillar. The thing is, it's easy to like glorify somebody. I mean, she might have been difficult at some things, but evidently, by all accounts,
Sure.
pretty good reputation. And she
Yeah.
did deserve a proper send-off. So what they decided to do is auction off that fancy dress from Paris to pay for it. But at the last minute, an anonymous donor, who probably was that lover, sent a check for $1,000, insisted it all be used for the funeral and that Pearl be buried in Paris dress.
She really deserved a great send-off. She sounds amazing. I want to learn more about Pearl.
She's
I love
pretty great.
her.
So it was quite a party. Pearl was gowned in the pink Paris dress and placed in a lavender-colored coffin. Crowds lined the street, even these judgmental women. They lined the street as a band playing somber funeral music accompanied the coffin to the Mount Pisgah cemetery where Pearl was laid to rest. And from what I can read, she was the only quote-unquote working girl to have been buried inside the cemetery proper. Everybody else who was like that was buried kind of outside the fence. They lowered her coffin into the grave and marked it with a wooden headstone. Then the band picked up the tempo and they played "It's Gonna Be a Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight" all the way back to the old homestead where there was a party to honor Pearl.
Like there should be.
The old homestead was purchased by a woman named Hazel Vernon, who continued to run it as a brothel from 1897 to 1915. Prostitution was eventually outlawed, and the building was a boarding house, then a private residence. In June 1958, the old homestead opened up as a museum, and if you go to Cripple Creek, you can visit it. One last thing, there was a rumor that Pearl's pink Paris dress had thread made from real gold, not gold-colored thread, but thread made from gold. So for a time, some grave robbers kept trying to plunder the grave. Eventually, her wooden headstone was removed and replaced with a marble headstone with another heavy piece of marble covering the grave.
There we go.
As Jackie Kennedy once said, pearls are always appropriate. And somehow, even though she was a madam of a bordello, Pearl Devere was.
Ah. If you'd like to hear more information on this episode, you can visit the link in our show notes.
We will also include the links to both the Old Homestead and Cripple Creek District Museum so you can learn about them too.
Yeah, check them out in our show notes. And to listen to more episodes, you can visit thewildwilddeath.com. And hello, be sure to visit our social media, our Instagram at The Wild Wild Death. Thank you for listening.
See you next time.
Adios, muchachis. The Wild Wild Death is a production of 2222 Media.